Hello, Lensbaby family. Super excited to be back with you for day number 2 of the Shoot Extraordinary Conference. How are you guys all today? I can see the chat's already blowing up. Very excited to be here with you. Again, if you don't know me, I am Michael Anthony, and I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Lensbaby. And I'm very excited to be back with you for day number 2 of the Shoot Extraordinary Conference. Yesterday was a huge day. A little insider trading information. We had almost 100,000 minutes of watch time across the world, with over 40 different countries participating in day one. So I'm very excited to be here with you, and I cannot wait to have this amazing day two take place. I'm looking at the schedule here. We have so many amazing people coming in to be a part of this with us today. And if you are not ready for this, I'm telling you what, you are going to have an amazing day with us. So, just to give you guys a little bit of an update here, as you may have saw yesterday, we are re-airing the conference. So if you can't stay throughout the course of the day, or you have to pop away or whatever, we will be re-airing the conference. And additionally, all the videos will be up on our YouTube channel in the coming days. So keep that in mind, because I know, like, obviously, depending on where you are in the world, it could be 1 a.m., it could be 6 a.m., it could be 2 p.m., so we understand that. We want to make sure everyone can access this information. So that said, where are you watching from? Where are you at today? What is going on in your world? Let's see. And I'm having some people saying it might be having some audio issues. Let me, you know how it is, guys. This is live. Can everyone hear me okay? Let's make sure. If you can hear me okay, just go ahead and let me know in the chat. Audio sounds fine to me. Audio sounds fine to me. So, okay, awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, for those of you who the audio does not sound great, it might actually be your settings. So double check your settings for me. Thank you. I didn't actually change anything. So today I'm very excited. We have Jo Badampati. She's going to be teaching about making magic indoors. If you saw her video from last year's conference, it's absolutely phenomenal. We have Craig and Uta Reckhorn. They're going to have this phenomenal conversation, which I've actually already had the privilege of listening to, and it was amazing. We have Ali France talking about channeling color, Jennifer Carr talking about landscape. I've seen so many of you talking about how you're excited about that. And we're going to have more giveaways, more prizes, more amazing things happening for the community here today. As you saw yesterday, you want to make sure you're engaging. You want to make sure you're in the chat, sharing, commenting, liking, supporting all these amazing Lensbaby educators as they bring you their heart and their experience to help you shoot extraordinary. Yesterday, before we signed off, I told you that one lucky person was going to win a $250 gift card to lensbaby.com. And that lucky person is Judy Fitzpatrick. So, Judy, congratulations. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for interacting. We are going to get you a $250 lensbaby.com gift card. So, Judy Fitzpatrick, congratulations. Please reach out to customer happiness at lensbaby.com. We will also be reaching out to you, so we'll make sure that we get that to you. So again, Judy Fitzpatrick, congratulations. You've won a $250 gift card. Now, that said, guys, keep in mind, you are going to want to engage. You're going to want to comment. You're going to want to share. You're going to want to have conversations as we go, because not only am I watching, but the entire Lensbaby team is, and we want to reward everyone who is participating. And please keep in mind, on day 4, we are giving away a gigantic grand prize package to one lucky Lensbaby photographer, which will include a $1,000 Lensbaby gift card, a Sony A7C, a Fundy premium membership, and a featured blog post on lensbaby.com. So you're going to want to engage. You're going to want to show up. You're going to want to be a part of this. And as we know, obviously, if you're not watching live, that's okay. And we recognize that not everyone could be here. So if you did pre-register for the conference, you are also entered into eligibility for that. So keep that in mind. If you have questions throughout the conference about the gift cards, about the promos, about the flash sales that we're doing, and you'll see that pop up on the screen here, please feel free to reach out in the chat or email customerhappiness@lensbaby.com, and our team is here ready and willing to support you with any of your questions and anything that you need help with. So I don't know about you guys, but I am super excited to dive into day number 2. So if you're ready, do me a favor and just hit "I'm ready" in the comments. Want to see, let's go. Robert, Helen, Patricia, Dave, Barb, Mary, Noreen, everybody is in the chat. It's looking awesome today. Jillian, Eileen, Candy. Wow. So many people are ready. Let's do this. I'm super excited. Yeah, look at, and again, make sure you hit the like. If you're on YouTube, hit the like, hit the subscribe, comment, share, tell everybody, text your grandma right now. Let everybody know that this is going down, because we're very excited for today. And honestly, this first presentation is absolutely phenomenal. So without further ado, let's jump in to day 2.
Hey everyone, I'm super excited to be here to be talking a little bit about making magic indoors. For a lot of those who might be familiar with my work, might observe that I absolutely love shooting indoors. Shooting indoors can be quite challenging, especially when you have tight spaces, and also you might feel a little bit constricted or restricted in terms of where your windows are, where the light's coming from, etc. And it can present a little bit of a challenge. However, I'm excited to share a couple of tips, as well as how I use my lenses, as well as my creative thinking to make some magic indoors. So let's get started. Okay. So just a little bit about me. I am a lifestyle fine art photographer based in California, Northern California in Sacramento. I'm an educator at Click Photo School. I teach a full workshop called The Imperfectionist. It's all about rule breaking. I'm also an author of a self-paced class called Shadows and Light. So I geek out a lot about light and shadows, obviously. I've taught at various conferences, Click Away, Reset, Imaging, WPPI, Lensbaby, etc. I'm also the co-founder of the virtual retreats called Call Me Artist Retreat, and an ambassador for Miller's as well as Lensbaby. Okay, so let's talk about making magic indoors and getting started. Right? So when we approach with shooting indoors, or, it could be outdoors or anything, but especially with shooting indoors, thinking about your lens choice, stepping back and observing and making a note of how the light enters the space, or where you are in the space compositionally, thinking in terms of where you are with respect to your subject, with respect to the light, with respect to any other objects that you might be having in the space. So stepping back and observing of what is it that you're exactly trying to achieve there, or coming up with a story or an idea or your vision is absolutely important. With regards to lens choices, you have to think about focal length, and what is one of your favorite lenses you might want to use for shooting indoors. For me, as an example, I absolutely love using H35, and I've been using this H35 as well as H80 for almost 4+ years now. But for the past 2+ years, I've been really using my H35 quite a bit, and touch wood, I'm yet to get bored out of it. So it's really never happened yet. That being said, I do use other lenses as well. Like, I really love using my Sol 45, my Omni filters, which is not really a lens, but it's more of an attachment. But they can help me with achieving my creative vision as to when and where I might require them. However, my go-to has always really been the H35, just because I personally feel that it's really versatile for the soft and the creamy and the dreamy feel that I desire in my images. Okay, so lens choice is super important. Stepping back and observing, and this feels that it's just so basic, but it is really the more critical part of how I really work. Observing and looking at where you are can really just make the storytelling happen, and can really just help you to think, okay, do I really just need to step a couple of steps more behind? Do I need to take a few steps forward? How do I need to move with respect to my subject so that I can optimize or make the best of the scenario, the lighting, etc. of where you're shooting, especially in tight spaces. The story, whether you're, taking portraits, you're focusing on details, environmental portraits, what you're trying to achieve or what are you trying to do, is another thing that is important. Making magic indoors. So having a clean frame. So for me, I personally like images that are a bit more on the clean side of things. And what I do to achieve something like that from the storytelling perspective is I like to remove any objects that I feel don't belong there. And, if you are someone who really likes a documentary approach, you don't really have to move the scene around too much, but being intentional and being purposeful of what you want to include as well as what you want to take out in the frame is something that is important to keep thinking, especially when you're shooting indoors. So, it also, we'll talk a little bit about moment-based and how to approach something like that from a storytelling perspective. However, at least for me, like I said, for most of my images, I like to make sure that my frame is clean. Everything that I have in the image going on is very purposeful, is very intentional, and has a meaning and a reason for why it's in the frame. Making magic indoors, paying attention to the light. So, whether you're shooting in your own home, and I know I've been talking quite a bit about shooting in your own home, especially, because that is something that you're always there. Not everyone has access to studios or indoor spaces. And shooting outside with new spaces can actually be a bit more trickier than shooting indoors in your own home, right? Because in your own home, although it can get a little bit repetitive when you're doing the same thing, it still feels a bit more familiar so that you don't really get into any surprises. You know where the light's coming from, you know where the windows are, you observe as to when's the sunrise happening, in which room, which direction the room is facing, etc., etc. Now, when you are shooting in new places, whether it is in an indoor studio that you have just rented or whether it's a commercial indoor space, try to see if you can make either a mental note when, if you don't have any access to that space prior to you shooting there, see if you can ask for photos of how the space looks like. Go to the website to see, is it a dark space? Are the walls really super dark? How is the light entering the space? What will happen if I shot, summer with summer light? What will happen if I shot sunrise during the winter? So think about the possibilities of what can happen within the space that you're shooting so that you are mentally prepared as to observe what is the light physically doing in that space, and you have a better idea of how to make the best of that lighting situation of where you're shooting at. Light and compositional decisions. So light to me is a really important compositional element, and that's how I see it. So thinking about how the subject is interacting with the light, right? So where should my subject be positioned with respect to light in the space? Do you want to use side light? Do you want to use flat light? Do you want to use backlight in the space? Then if I use backlight, what happens to the mood or the story of the image that I'm trying to make over here? So giving attention or paying attention to those sort of situations that you are in and thinking about where your subject is with respect to the light in the space is important. Compositional rules, right? So think about your basic compositional rules. Am I doing center composition? Am I filling the frame? Am I just taking a portrait of the subject? Do I want an environmental shot? Do I need to step behind? Do I need, am I doing rule of thirds? Am I framing my subject with something? So think about your compositional rules and don't be afraid to change things up if need be as well. Think about focus, right? So especially when you're shooting with manual lenses, understanding that part and studying composition in terms of with respect to focus is important too. So when it comes to focus, think about, are you trying to photograph details over there? So what aperture should I shoot at? Are you trying to focus on, do you want more of the subject shown in the image? So where should my focus fall? Even though you're really manually adjusting your focus, you need to really have a better idea as to what part of the image or what part of the subject you're hoping that the focus falls on. Okay, so getting out of a creative rut. Now, manual lenses, at least, like I said, for me, have time and again really helped me to get out of a creative rut. They, especially during this time of the year when I feel really, just burnt out or overwhelmed with my client work, or it's towards the end of the year and I'm trying to reflect and trying to, just think about like, what are my goals for next year? Or, maybe I'm just tired of creating something that is very, just feels like it's very similar to what I've already created. Picking up your manual lens, whatever that is. Like, for example, I don't personally use, the twist quite a bit, but maybe if I pick it up and, practice with my twist, for the next 30 days could be a really great creative exercise to get to learn about how the lens operates, which situations will that lens really be useful for me in terms of telling the story or creating the mood that I might be after, right? So spending some time with that lens that you're working with, as well as just playing around with light and, your subject, whoever you're shooting, really just helps you forces you rather to be present in the situation, and really just helps you to play around to get out of that creative rut. Manual lenses to me personally have been just an amazing amazing tool as a creative tool to have in my lens and gear toolbox. It just feels that, when you are in an oversaturated market with client work as well or personal work as well, they have really just helped me to stand apart, because I personally feel that no one really just uses that lens in the same way, and everyone really has such a different style of shooting. So you really just see something, completely different when each of you is picking up that lens and trying to create something with your manual lens. It really, like I said, it really just helps me, I feel, to stand out of the crowd, as well as giving that unique and creative identity, even with my client work. Okay, so we're going to go through just a little bit of image study so that we can see how I have applied some of that lens choices, light, as well as composition, all of that combined in my image, and how the visual flow really works in my images. Okay, so for example, in this first image over here, getting creative with light, I personally love using manual lenses, Lensbaby lenses especially, to get some really beautiful light haze as well as light flares in my work. Just when I see this kind of like rainbow flares or, light haze, I just completely I find myself to be this light nerd. So I'm just geeking out over here thinking that, oh, look at that beautiful light. I can get completely carried away when I see some, beautiful light like this, and I can just keep shooting until the light's almost gone. So for example, for this particular image, this was taken with my Sol 45, and this was taken, I wanted to make this more of a silhouette, and what I did here was I was trying to make it a double exposure, and we'll cover a little bit about multiple exposures and what I do for multiple exposures with Lensbaby lenses. I was photographing my toddler, and obviously toddlers really don't stay in one place for a long period of time, right? So what I did over here was I did 2 exposures, and for the first exposure, it was just my daughter with this beautiful silhouette and just a little bit of rim light as well on this beautiful rainbow circular flare that comes with Sol 45. And then I just took an image of these lace curtains that I have and just combined them in Photoshop to create something so that I see a little bit of depth in the image as well. Perspective, right? So when it comes to creating, rule breaking or thinking out of the box or creating something that you feel more drawn to, that has a little bit more of a mysterious feel or rather intriguing, that's just something that I really like to use quite a bit in my work. Perspective is something that I like to play around with, whether it is creating images that make the viewer think that, oh, okay, what am I exactly looking at over here? I get the story, but maybe, it takes me to another dimension or another perspective, almost, right? And here, just using my hands and the body language over here, using my hand over here, I'm guiding the viewer this way to look at my face. This was a self-portrait, so I was guiding the viewer to look at my face over here, and then my focus was slightly off because I wanted it kind of on my eyes, but the image still works because you see this, a little bit of this lace in the background, and it really brings on that intrigue or that mystery feel because everything else in the image is in blur, right? So finding that right balance between using blur as well as focus and working with perspective and composition can really help you enhance your image. Okay, compositional elements, focusing on details. I personally love to focus on details whenever I can, and especially with fall details, or with, with your kiddos, with toddlers or flowers or whatever, leaves, whatever you're photographing, focusing on details. It's just a really beautiful way to really appreciate just those little things. And with my daughter just holding this leaf that she just found on the road, or on the trail rather, I just loved to focus. I absolutely loved that I was focusing on the details of her fingers as well as this, and that the focus did not fall on her face, and that created a little bit of mystery, so that the viewer is looking at her fingers, looking at this beautiful color that's just guiding them to look at, okay, there's just a little bit of mystery going on behind the leaves over here. So think about how you can use your compositional elements to enhance the frame or the story in the image too. Exploring creative light play by deepening the shadows. So for me, the Sol 45 as well as the Edge 35 have been an absolute amazing lenses, because they have really just helped me to deepen the shadows that are already there in the frame, and taking the focus away from it and then putting the focus back on my subject where I'm really intending the viewer to look at, right? The left, there's just a lot of negative space on the left side of the frame, but it almost feels like, just with this balance of light and dark, it feels like she's inviting the viewer to say, okay, come on in, let me just take you to my world. And this sprinkle of dust in the air just feels that it just adds to that element of magic as well. And similar over here, that, there's a little bit of dust over here. And, when you work on your exposure a little bit and observe the light, you're able to catch that dust in the air. And I really like to sometimes use my, Edge 35 is just a perfect storytelling lens. For this image here, I used my Edge 35 because I was trying to focus on the moment as well as make it more of a storytelling approach of my daughter, for example, over here, just writing on the blackboard, right? Storytelling from a focus perspective. So here, this was a self-portrait of just my shadow, and using, I think I used a Sol 45, I can't exactly tell, or possibly Edge. Here, I really just wanted to put the focus back only on the shadows, which was the main story, as well as where I wanted the viewer to look at without any distractions on the other side of the frame. Okay. So let's explore a little bit more about creative light. For example, here in this image, I used an Omni filter, which is more like a prism. If you've never used an Omni filter, it's not a lens. It's just an attachment on your existing lens. And what I absolutely love about it is when, light hits on it in the right angle, you get this beautiful rainbow. And I just absolutely love using just that because I'm really a huge fan of minimalism and subtlety in my frame. So when everything else just feels clean, calm and composed, that rainbow light just hitting my subject just feels like the perfect pop of color or pop of light that I really just that just draws the viewer in. Okay. Use of textures. So for me, I am a huge fan of textures, and especially natural textures, or sometimes textures found all around us. For example, the image on the left side, I use some water to create a little bit of this water bokeh, and I have a behind the scenes of this image of how I created that will be coming up. And what I did there was basically I just used some water spray on a window and did a double exposure portrait of my daughter. And the image to the right, I basically did a double and multiple exposure in camera of some mountain range that was just right around there. And what I love the most about it is the slight imperfection that you see with where the focus falls in certain areas, and there's a little bit of blur around her. And then you see a little bit of light flare around as well. So that really subtle mix of blur as well as focus is something that absolutely just draws me in to make the image a bit more powerful, and as well as showcase the natural textures that were in the frame over there. Some more examples of perspective. In this image, I had my daughter facing the light at the window, and I used a Sol 45 over here because I really love how it deepens the shadows around you. And I had a fog machine going over here, so she had a lot of streaming light that was just coming on her. And this image was shot with as a reflection of her in the mirror. So it's just a really neat perspective just to play around with. The top image was of a ballet dancer who was indoors, and I believe I have used a Sol 45 for this image as well. And this one was an H35, and I absolutely loved focusing on the details of my hand as well as the details of the color and a little bit of the work on my dress. Okay, another thing that I absolutely love when I'm using my Lensbaby lenses is the ability to create out of focus images that I would love to use as textures, or sometimes they're just beautiful to look at. So what I do, and especially with Christmas around the corner, they just really make this beautiful overlays that you can use for your own work. So if you have Christmas tree lights, just use any, absolutely all of these lenses will really just create different bokeh, and you can when you look at that, I am a huge fan of bokeh, so you will just automatically get drawn to it. But these are just some different ways as to how I used out of focus in my images. The first one was the H35. This was the H35. I believe this was the Sol, and then this was the H35 as well, although this is not entirely out of focus. Okay, so something that I love to repeat to myself, something that's important to always keep in mind, is that perfectionism is really self-destructive simply because there's really no such thing as perfect. Okay? Perfection is an unattainable goal, because the more that you feel to desire to seek perfection, the more you're going to be in that struggle where you're constantly chasing perfection and it's just not there, right? And hence, to me, picking up these lenses, especially when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel burnt out, when I feel exhausted of doing the same thing that I had been doing for, especially when I'm shooting clients or other things, etc., just gives me that ability to truly let go and create something that is different. And every time I can approach the same space that looks different, that feels different, as well as that possibly tells a different story, so because even another person can pick up the same lens and shoot the same scene in a different way, but even you, when you pick up these lenses, and it's, I talk about these lenses, but it's more about the feeling to me, because otherwise, if it's not that feeling that it drives in me, that I'm absolutely, I love these dreamy images. I love these, feel of this beautiful light that I see. I'm completely drawn to it all the time. And hence I really feel, I keep going back because I feel like I'm a new person when I'm able to pick up any of these lenses and create with them. Okay, creative expression, right? So something to think about is a couple of questions, and just to help you with your thought process is, what if you wanted to have the creative freedom to express just because, right? Whether you're a hobbyist, whether you're a pro photographer, creating for clients, or you're just genuinely curious as to what kind of magic can I really create with these, with a manual lens like this. So what if you really get into that, that freedom of expression, absolutely for nobody else, but just for yourself, because your artist heart really desires it, right? What if you wanted to make an impact just through our own personal experimentation? Your creative experimentation is really just unique to you. Fine art, storytelling, and rule breaking, and being a fine art photographer who's very light driven. The way I would typically approach that is, rules are really like your outline on a blank canvas. These rules are super important, and they really just help you to get started, right? But as a creative, we take the liberty to create original work that really challenges these traditional rules, but still respecting the rules that have been in place for centuries, right? So we don't want to create, we know that, okay, this is the rule. This is how I want to use the light. This is how I want to have my subject in the image. This is how I want to shoot indoors. So we are respecting the rules because they have been in place. And then we know the reason why these rules are there, because they make sense. However, taking that liberty of being creative and breaking one rule sometimes while keeping other rules in place could really just be an extension of conventional photography, while also enabling the artist to really experiment with his or her thoughts and ideas in the story, while really just going beyond a simple photograph, right? So you're just trying, and that's why I call it making magic indoors, or rather just making magic, because you're really just taking an ordinary image and trying to find the beauty in something as simple as, what you see every day might be really ordinary and simple, but you can still create magic with that something ordinary. Experimentation. This is one of my favorite quotes: ever tried, ever failed. No matter, try again, fail better. Right? So because I think sometimes when it comes to experimentation, when it comes to using manual lenses, we try, we fail, we don't get the focus where we want, we feel defeated, and then we just don't want to pick up that lens again because we feel, I just don't know what I'm doing, or I can really just never get the focus where I want it to be. So even if you don't be successful in the very first attempt, or even if you're not successful in your 20th attempt, it's okay to put your lens down, but make sure to pick it up again and then try it again. So that way you're really just learning from your mistakes. Not really mistakes, I would call it experimentation. That's why, right? So you're really learning from your experiments, and then you would know, okay, I think this is what the look or the style, or this is what the mood I'm really desiring in this particular image. When you are opening up yourself and accepting that idea that really nothing's perfect in life, and no human being, even situation, is ever going to be perfect, you really open up the possibility to grow as a human, as an artist, to really experiment. You're able to let in the possibility of trying new things. Okay, so lastly, my favorite phrase that I really love to use all the time is, don't shoot what it looks like, but shoot what it feels like, because that's really what true artistry is all about. Thank you for listening, and I would love to take any questions. Hey everyone, I'm Jyotsna Bhamidipati and I go by Jo, and I wanted to take a little bit of time today to talk about my process of making magic indoors. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. I have been a photographer for about close to 6 years now, And my work is lifestyle, but I really like the fine art approach in images that I create. And I got really pulled into using Lensbaby lenses about 4 years ago, when I stumbled across an ad, I think, for a Lensbaby Edge 80. And that was my very first lens that I had used for a Lensbaby lens. And to date, the Edge series have been my absolute favorite lenses from the Lensbaby lenses. I do own pretty much all the Lensbaby lenses, the Edge series, the Sol, the Twist, and all of them. And I use them really individually for different reasons, for different looks, and for different variety of looks that I might be going for, or different moods, etc. My personal favorite so far really has been the Edge series, especially because I really just love how the blur, the smoothness of the blur just really helps to establish focus on the subject, or on the main hero subject or the story that I want to focus on, and everything else in the image really just falls neatly into blur. While we just get into the presentation section over here, I'm going to be talking about how I use these lenses for creating different stories, and we'll get into that, and how I decide which lens to use at which point, once we just get into that section of the presentation. Just talking about making magic indoors, however, we all of us, I think, 2020 really just changed us. We spend so much time indoors, and I think since last year, even though it's 2021 and things are so much different as compared to last year, but the pandemic has really just left us all with that thought that, we can be indoors, we can create images or create magic indoors. All of us, we spend so much time at our homes, in our apartments, in our, houses, wherever we are. We spend so much time, whether it's, in the mornings, whether we are getting ready to go to work, in the evenings, once we are back from work, different times of the day, over the weekends. Sure, we all love to go outside and spend time outdoors, and, it just feels refreshing, but we still spend so much time indoors and get so much done in our homes. And to me, I think sometimes that our homes are so close to us. That's where the stories really happen. And sometimes I feel because we are in our home every single day, it just feels that we can lack inspiration. I personally really just love creating in my own home, or trying to find these little new pockets of light, or new space, not really new spaces, but new ways that the light hits a surface, or the light enters my living room or my bedroom, because light is constantly changing, right? Something to keep in mind is that light is just constantly changing. It's very dynamic. It's not really very static, and it's constantly changing. So keeping that in mind, I just really love to observe just how light enters different spaces in our homes, and how it really just inspires us. And, just creating indoors and using these spaces that we live in to tell stories is something that I absolutely love, because it's just really helped me seeing ordinary spaces in a really new light. So let's get started. So here I wanted to use my Edge 35 to take a couple of self-portraits so that I can utilize the light, the backlight, that was just so dreamy at that time of the day, as well as to get a few light flares in camera. By finding the right angle, as well as moving your camera as well as your tripod around to find the best angle as well as the best perspective, is really the key to make sure that you're really harnessing the light indoors as well as making the best of composition when you're shooting indoors. And as you can see, it's just really a lot of going back and forth with my camera, especially when I take self-portraits, to find the perfect angle and to find this perfect light flare that I really love in camera. Playing around with that last light of the day, especially when you see pockets of light like this around your home, try to make sure that you observe and take note of what you see around your space. That could be upstairs in one of your rooms, or it could be a tiny pocket of light or a sliver of light that you might notice, and just playing around with shadows. Could be shadows of your hands, could be shadows of the plants or objects in your space, opening up the curtains, opening up the windows, can really just help you to utilize that really warm, intense last light of the day that you see in your space, no matter how big or small your space actually is. In terms of my exposure settings, especially when I'm shooting with shadows in mind, you just have to make sure that you expose for the highlights in the image. And if you are standing in that pocket of light, or maybe you're standing a little bit further away such that you're photographing only your shadow or your subject shadow, thinking about the storytelling aspect over here is also important. Once you get your light and your exposure settings right, and you're all situated with that, think about how you want to frame your subject with that pocket of light, and utilize any scarves, any objects, or anything that you see around that could actually add to the whole story or the storytelling aspect of the image as well. So in this series of images, I really just wanted to photograph my daughter using that slight pocket of light, or the slight sliver of light that you can actually see. And I decided to use my Sol 45 over here to just really focus only on the light when everything else in the frame really just falls into that deep shadows. Move your hands slightly up. Okay, hey everyone, so here we have some backlight. This is our master bedroom, and it's a lot of bold colors, but the light comes in here once we move from downstairs to upstairs. The light comes in here a little bit later in the day. So here I want to try and photograph just a silhouette of her. So what I'm having her do is just more of a profile shot. So I'm having her just face the the wall over here, and just get the light to hit her face, just beautifully, just like that. Try it again. I'm going to move. So the more if you move your body physically a little bit, 6 inches to the left, 6 inches to the right, or however you move, you could just get different kinds of light. You could get room light, you could get silhouettes, you could get just beautifully exposed backlight images as well. So it all depends on your angle, your positioning, and your settings as well. So here, my intention is to go for a silhouette. So okay, so I'm going to try to do a double exposure here. Can you just pour some water there?
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. Like very gently, a little bit, or maybe just sprinkle because it's all going to fall here. So maybe just take a little bit with your hands and see, or just like, using a hand just to put it on the wall. Yeah, just like that. So it's a little bit messy, but it's a little bit watery and perfect. Yeah, that's it. Now we put this away. Okay. And then I'm just going to see if I can photograph just the texture here. Right? I just wish we didn't have that water bubble near your mouth. Maybe we could I could have angled it properly. Can I just try it one more time? So here, what I'm trying to do is just a double exposure. So I am planning to take her image again as a silhouette, and then we'll pour the water again to take the image of the texture over here, and then see if you can create a really cool double exposure. Okay, so just go back and sit there. Thanks for your patience, Johnny.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra dimension and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, lyric look.
Something extraordinary.
Hi everyone, my name is Sophia Sitnikiene. I am a fine art photographer based in the United Kingdom. I'm also a Lensbaby ambassador, a Click Pro Elite and a Hello Artist. My photography journey started quite a while ago when I was studying graphic design. We used to learn film photography in those days, and my mum was a hobbyist photographer, so I used to take her old film camera with me when I was learning. I didn't really have the time to practice much, so I didn't get that serious about it. It was only until 2007 when I went to Poland on holidays with my husband. I bought myself, I think it was a Canon 20D and a 50mm lens, and I took a magazine with me, which was my manual, because there was lots of information on how to shoot, in aperture mode, shutter, speed mode, all those, different modes that I wasn't used to, and I practiced a lot and I really enjoyed it. And I continued to take pictures for a while, and then I got busy and I stopped. And it wasn't until my daughter Olivia was born in 2006 that I took my camera again. I actually bought another camera. I bought a Canon 5D Mark II, I think. And then I started to get really serious about finding my voice, about capturing more of images that told stories of my family. While I was finding my voice and, going through my photography journey, I found a love for nature work and macro work and the outdoors. This has brought me a lot of happiness. I find that when I'm outdoors shooting nature, I feel like I'm in peace, like I'm very calm. It's almost like I'm meditating. It's something that I enjoy a lot, and that has helped me a lot during the lockdowns and all this, time that we've all gone through with COVID. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I started using Lensbaby lenses and optics in 2018 or 19, I think 19. My husband gave me for my birthday my first Lensbaby, which was the Composer Pro 2 with the Suite 35 optic. And when I started to use it, I found it quite difficult because I still wasn't used to shooting. I already had learned to use my camera in manual mode, and that was a big step for me. That changed everything because I could control light better, I had a lot more control over my scene, over my image. But I still didn't use my lenses that well, in manual mode. And Lensbaby lenses and optics, they're all manual. But I found that the more I kept it on my camera body, the more I used it, the easier it got, and it just made me a better photographer. So I am incredibly grateful for that. It's just about keeping the composer or the lenses on your camera for at least 2 weeks and just trying every day. And to be honest, I find it hard to go back to my other lenses because I am so happy with the images I've taken, the results I get, that when I go back to my normal lenses, I find that I don't get the same kind of results, like the kind of dreaminess, the blurriness, like all that kind of emotive photography that I'm always drawn to. I love to use the optics and lenses for my nature work. I love to use them for my children. So I am very happy, to have discovered the Lensbaby lenses and optics, and I hope to continue, using them for many, many years. Some of these images that are going by are macro and nature photographs that I've taken in London parks. I like to go to London parks a lot with my family. Some of them are, well, actually a lot of them are taken in my garden, and some of them, when the weather's not great, are taken indoors. I like to use a background indoors and window light. I'm always very, very careful with the way light falls on my subject. I'm always studying light, always trying to improve my knowledge of, you know, how to use light and what light means to my photography. So I'm very careful with the way light falls on my subject. I will always, like in summertime, springtime, when it's, you know, the sun's quite bright, I will wake up early in the morning, shoot in the morning, or shoot when the sun sets, because I don't like those, you know, that harsh light and those shadows that you get on your nature work from the, you know, bright sunlight. So I'm careful with that. And with my children, I don't mind, you know, what time of the day it is. I can make it work with them. So now I'm gonna just show you the lenses and optics that I will be using for the following videos. We'll be doing some shots indoors and outdoors. So this one is the Velvet 85. It's probably one of my favorites. I love to use this one for macro photography, nature, and for my children. It has a macro function. This is the Composer Pro 2 with the Suite 35 optic. This was the first one I ever got in 2019, and I still love my Suite 35. I love this optic during autumn or fall, because I can get some really lovely images of fallen leaves and tree trunks, which I love. This one is the Edge 80. It's quite new to my collection. I got it this year for my birthday. I absolutely love the macro function that this has. It has a hidden macro function that you can extend and use it to get closer to your main subject. I also love it for portraits of my children. This one is the Edge 35. It's probably one of my favorites as well, because I love the way this one catches storytelling images of my children. I love to use it for black and white photography. And this one is the Sol 45, another one of my favorites. It's very lightweight, easy to carry, and it's very easy to focus with this lens. So if you are a beginner, I would recommend the Sol 45. So now we're going to start with an indoor shot, something that I do a lot when the weather's not great. I have this background that I found on eBay, and it has two sides. It has a black side and a white side. So I usually, you know, keep it in its bag, but when the weather's not great, I'll bring it out, I'll unfold it, and I will stand it somewhere near to the chairs or the bicycle, like you'll see soon. It's quite large, and it works very well to cover, you know, everything. I love to use it for portraits of my daughter, of my son, and I use it as well for, you know, pictures of nature. I also have another one that's got a blue side and a grey side, and I have different fabrics that I sometimes use, but I kind of like the result that the dark background gives me, so I'm kind of using that one more at the moment. I do have a background stand. I've got different stands, but, you know, it's just quicker. I sometimes use a chair, you know, to hold it. And now I'm going to use my Lensbaby Velvet AC5, and these are some red roses that I bought in the supermarket. I'm extending it so that I can get the macro function, which means I can get very close to my subject. That's the great thing about the velvets, that they all have a macro function, so you can get really close to your subjects, and that is great when you're doing macro and nature work. So I'm going to take a few shots. I take quite a few. I'm using window light, so I'm going to have that beautiful side light, which is a type of light that I like to use a lot for my indoor work when I'm doing nature macro and my children's portraits. And here I'm trying to capture like different angles. I'm trying to look like, I look at the petals, see like which, you know, if there's the petal that is damaged, I might, you know, move things around or change, you know, the position of my main subject, just to get the nicer angle. So it takes me a few shots, and then I usually get, you know, the results that I'm looking for. So here we have one of my favorite images from this session. I did edit it in Lightroom and Photoshop, and I was happy with the results here. Now here I'm using a helping hand. This is something you can find on Amazon or on eBay. It helps you to hold your flower in place. They're different prices. And there's different styles, but I have one of the most simple ones, and I sometimes use this when I want to hold just one flower, or photograph one flower, and so I'll use my helping hand, and here I'm just like looking for different angles, adjusting it until I get the look that I'm going for. So sometimes I have to like adjust, move and change angles. And here I'm still using the Lensbaby Velvet 85 to do this indoor shot. I took off a little leaf, was in the way. And I'm trying to focus here. I've got the macro function extended and I'm trying to focus until I get the result I want. And I enjoy photographing my children, my family, nature, macro work, and I also sometimes do street photography because street photography is where I started. But for me it's important to document life as it unfolds, to create images that matter to me and matter to us. I find a lot of inspiration in nature, the outdoors, in different seasons, in the weather. I also feel inspired by my children, by their growth, by the things they're learning. This is one of the images that came out from this session. I'm really happy with the results, and again I edited the image in Lightroom and Photoshop. I always want my work to reflect the way I see and understand the world. I want my images to have a timeless and nostalgic feel. I love to edit in black and white when I'm working with my family and with children because of that nostalgic feel that you get with black and white imagery. When I'm working with nature and macro, I do like to edit in color because I'm really fascinated by all of the textures, tones and colors that you can find outdoors. So I like to, reflect that in my work. I do edit in black and white sometimes, but I prefer my nature work, in color. Here I'm taking some portraits of my daughter Olivia. Again, I'm using window light so that I can get that beautiful side light, and I'm asking her to slowly turn her head towards me so that I can see how the light is falling on her face. I'm using my my Velvet 85, which I absolutely love for portraits and macro work. You get this beautiful glow in the highlights, as you can see here, and it's probably one of my favorite portrait lenses ever. Now here we have my garden. It's a small garden, but there is a lot of things that I can photograph here, and I have really enjoyed, capturing the small details. Sometimes, when you are doing macro work, you can't really see things, everything's so small, but when you're using a lens or an optic that has a macro function, it's really great because you can get close to your subject and then you can see all those details that you can't really see with the human eye. For my optics, I have the Lensbaby macro extension, the macro filters, which I love to use. But here I am using my Velvet 85 to capture some of these flowers that I have in my garden. I like to, when I'm doing macro, I like to do slight movements, you know, backwards and forwards, because this helps me to focus. As everything is like magnified, it's not that easy to focus when you're not using a tripod. So I try to be very careful, and I do slight movements, you know, backwards and forwards. I mean, it depends what my intention is. Sometimes I like the blurry look, and sometimes I want a bit more detail in my main subject or my point of focus. So it's all about personal taste and personal choice. That's what I love about, you know, Lensbaby optics and lenses, is that creative freedom it gives me. I know that my images don't have to be super sharp, or they don't have to be, you know, everything has to be in focus. It can be the way I want it to be. Lensbaby's optics and lenses remind me of my dreams, and my dreams are, you know, they're important for me. I love to reflect that in my work. So I always see it as like when I'm dreaming, everything is kind of like blurry, magical, there's movement, and I love that I can see that in the images that I get with the Lensbaby lenses and optics. It's October and it's quite cloudy at the moment. It's around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I do like to shoot when it's cloudy because the clouds act like a softbox. They diffuse the light, so it's great to shoot at any time of the day. You don't have to worry about, you know, the harsh light you get with the sunshine in summer or sometimes spring. When it's like the month of October, September, November, December, and it's cloudy, I really enjoy shooting outdoors because everything is like the light's completely diffused. You know, as long as it doesn't rain, I always come back with shots that I'm happy with. So that is something that I enjoy doing, and I highly recommend. Here are some images that I captured in my garden using my Lensbaby Velvet 85. These were some flowers, and I really love the effect that the Velvet 85 adds to my images, this kind of ethereal glow. The Velvet 85 is a very beautiful lens, and I love it for, as I mentioned before, portraits and macro work, because it has that macro function when you extend it, which means you can get closer to your subject. Here I'm looking for more things to photograph in my garden. I found some leaves, some green leaves. I love photographing leaves and plants, so this is the final result. I photograph these leaves a lot. I love like the color green. I really love to edit, you know, and adjust the green tones to my taste. So it's something I love to do when there's, you know, when spring ends and summer ends and you have all these beautiful leaves. So now I'm using the Composer Pro 2 with my Edge 80 optic. This is a newer addition to my collection, and I'm going to photograph the hydrangeas. And what I love about, you know, the Edge 80 and the Edge 50 is that they have this macro function, which you can extend at the end of the optic, which allows you to get closer to your subject. I use this optic a lot during the summer, and I took lots of images, and I was very happy with the results because it's also a very beautiful portrait lens that I can use for my children. And since I love the Edge 35 so much, I think this is a great addition to my collection. So now I'm at Richmond Park in London, and it's one of our favourite parks to visit, and I love to take my children there because I like them to, you know, get familiar with their space before I start asking them, you know, to play so that I can take images of them. I don't usually ask them to pose for me unless I'm doing like an indoor shot. but sometimes I do. So I give them time, you know, to explore. Here, my daughter Olivia wanted to see the deers, so I carried her because she was a bit scared, but we managed to see them. So, you know, I try to entertain them. Here I was looking for a spot. The sun was quite bright, and when I'm with my children, because it's during a weekend, I have to work around them. So if I don't have, you know, the great kind of beautiful side light or the kind of light I want, I will work with what I have. So here I found, you know, lots of trees which have created a beautiful shade, and I found some fern which I want to photograph now. So here I have my rucksack, and I've got my Composer Pro 2, and I have my Suite 35, and I have screwed on my 3 Lensbaby macro filters. This will allow me to get closer to my subject. Now I'm in live view mode, and I will try to focus. I sometimes move between live view and I'll use, you know, just the viewfinder, but here I'm in live view and I'm trying to get a shot. The light was quite good here, so I'm trying to find different angles. And here are some of the images that I captured. These are some of the fern leaves, and I edited them in Lightroom and Photoshop. I really love the tones and textures. Autumn is one of my favorite times to go out and photograph. So now I'm going to remove the Suite 35, and I am going to change it to the Edge 35 because I want to take a picture of my children. I saw this beautiful tree, a gorgeous location. The light's a bit difficult to work with, but as I mentioned before, because it's a weekend, during the week my children are at school, I just have to work, you know, with the weather and with the light I have. And because it takes us quite a while to get to this park, I know, you know, that I just have to adapt to the conditions I have. And this is the final image. I really liked the trees and the colours in this location. Here I'm with my son Oscar. We're still at Richmond Park, and I've now changed to my Sol 45. I think this is a great lens for beginners because it's just so easy to focus with this lens, and it's also very lightweight. And we saw this beautiful location, and the sun is starting to set now. I've asked my son to sit for me so that we can take some portraits of him. I like the background. I love the textures in the background. And this is the image that I got. And now I'm with my daughter Olivia. I've asked her to do the same thing, to sit for me and pose for some portraits. And they were playing with this and like these dried flowers. So I asked them to use it as they found it amusing and entertaining. So I asked them to hold it for me. We were playing a game that I was telling them that we would take the flowers home, and you know, little games like this keeps them entertained, and it helps them, you know, to cooperate and really want to be in the picture. Because I don't really want to force them. If they're not in the mood, I will just leave them. I won't like ask them, you know, to take a picture or pose for me. So it worked out really well. And this is the final result for my daughter Olivia. And now we're going to take another shot of her standing. Sky was looking really beautiful because the sun was starting to set, and I knew it was going to get dark. So I was trying to hurry to get that last shot of her and them. This was one of them together, and this is the one I took of her. I would say the Sol 45 is great if you're a beginner. It's very lightweight, and it's just so easy to focus with this lens. I absolutely love it. So now we're going to do a color edit. We're going to start in Lightroom, and then we will open the image in Photoshop and continue there, and then come back to Lightroom. I'm going to show you my raw file. This is the before, and let's compare it with the after. So the one on the left is the before, the one on the right is the after. And now we're going to take the raw file and we are going to open it in the develop module. And I'm going to go to the basic panel and I am going to decrease the exposure to -80. This will darken my image, which I really love. I like my images to look underexposed, just a tiny bit, not too much. And then I am going to go to the top sections, so the temperature, and I'm going to bring down the temperature to 4092. This will cool down my image a bit, and I will bring up the tint to +13. I'm going to go now to my vibrance, and I'll bring my vibrance down to -22, and I'll bring the saturation down to -3. Now I am going to go down to the tone curve. I'm going to bring the darks down to -9. This will darken the darks more. It brings down the tone curve. And I am going to go to the HSL panel now, and this is where the colors really change. I'm going to go to the hue, and I'm going to go to the yellows and bring that yellow down to -41. And I'm going to bring the green down to +5. And this is going to really change my yellows and greens. And after this, I'm going to go to the saturation. And here I'm going to bring the yellows down to -36. And I'll bring the greens down to -22. Next, I'm going to go to the luminance one, and I'm going to bring down the red to -18. Then the orange to -16. Then we'll bring down the yellow to -9. And finally the green down to -16. So this is starting to change my tones even more and change my luminance values. And I'm going to go down to the bottom part, and I'm going to go to the calibration, to the green primary, and I'll bring up the hue to 12, and I'll bring down the saturation to -12. And we are going to now open the image in Adobe Photoshop. So I'll just wait for it to open. So once I open my image in Adobe Photoshop, I usually start in Lightroom and then always take them into Photoshop, and then I'll do any cloning or, any cleaning that is necessary. I always duplicate my layer, and I usually get my actions out. I have a collection of actions in my library that I use with all of my images, and I usually add a gradient map. This is like a red gradient map that I got through a course I bought through the Click community a long time ago. I use this one. It adds like a red tone to my shadows and image in general. And I usually, after this, add another overlay or gradient map by Jessica Drawson. I bought this a long time ago. This one is called Tea Tree, and this adds like a green earthy tone to my images. The gradient map, I usually bring it down to like 25%, and then the tea tree overlay, I bring it down to 50%. And after I've done this, I like to merge both layers. I don't like to keep them there. I just merge them, and I'm always, saving as I work. The next thing I do is go to my levels, my curve tone, and I like to add an S curve. This adds more contrast to your image, and I bring that down to 12%, and then I'll merge that with the layer underneath. And once that's done, I'll go and get my levels. It's an adjustment layer. I'll get my levels, and I'll start working with the reds. I'll move the reds. There's no formula for this. You just need to experiment and play around and find the tones that you like the most. after my reds, I'll go to my greens, and I'll move my greens. I'll move the midtones, the shadows, the highlights, just to see what works best. And then at the end, I go to my blues, and here is where I usually get the tones that I like. I like my tones to be on the cooler side, so I play a lot with this blue slider, with the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, just to see what kind of colors I can get. And then I'll blend that layer, I'll merge that layer with the layer underneath, so merge visible. So now I'm zoomed out, and I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer. I'll bring down the midtones, and I will invert my layer mask so that it's black, and I'll select a brush and I will paint with white. I will lower my opacity and I will lower my flow so that the brush strokes are not so harsh. And I am just going to paint on top of those bright areas, those like white areas or highlighted areas around my flower, because I want all the attention to be on my main subject, which is my flower. So I gently pass these brush strokes. I never rush this, because I want things to look very natural. And it usually takes me a few of these adjustment layers to get to where I want to get. I sometimes do this in Lightroom. I will grab a brush and lower my exposure, or lower my highlights or whites, and I'll pass it on those kind of brighter spots or areas. Also on the outsides, I like to darken the outsides of the image, and I'm kind of liking the way this is looking now. And I take my time, and I'm using my Wacom tablet, and I think I may need another layer because this part at the bottom is kind of bright, and I'm not sure I'll be able to get it the way I want it with just one layer. So I think I am going to just try increasing the opacity, and I'll add another layer and lower the midtones by bringing that curve down with a curve point. I'll invert my layer mask, Control I, and again with my white brush, I'll just pass it around those brighter areas. And I'll always play with my opacity and my flow. The flow kind of changes like the way your brush strokes appear on your images, so they won't be as noticeable. Like the higher your flow, the harsher or the harder is your brush stroke. And so I'm like passing these brush strokes so that I can cover those brighter areas, those lighter areas. I always do this zoomed out. Here I'm gonna play with my opacity again, with my flow, always using a white brush, and always on my layer mask. I will add another curves adjustment layer, and I'll bring again those midtones down. I'll invert this, Control I, and with my brush, again lowering my opacity and playing with my flow, I'll add those brush strokes, those brighter areas. I like to observe. I like to see the image quite zoomed out so that I can see how the whole picture looks like. And I'm kind of liking the way this is looking. I think it looks quite natural. I haven't lost any details. And I'm always saving. I'm always pressing Control S to save this back to Lightroom. And now you can see it's saving. I'm going to go back into Lightroom with this image just to add some final adjustments. When I go back into Lightroom is when I can really see how it's looking. I'm going to go back to my calibration panel at the bottom, and I am going to play with all of these colors, with the reds, the greens and the blues. There's no formula here. It depends on the image you have. I will move all of the sliders, the hue, the saturation on each color until I get the tones I want. There is not that much that I want to change at the moment. I'm just going for that nostalgic feel. I'm almost there. I just think the image could be more, I want it to be more on the blue side. I like my images to have like a cooler tone to them. But when I'm doing portraits, of course, I'm very careful with the skin tones, not to like mess up the skin tones in my children's portraits. Here I've lowered the exposure a little bit. I like my images to look underexposed, and after I've done this I would like to add a vignette. So I've taken a radial filter and I am going to try to invert this. I'm using the latest version of Lightroom, so please bear with me while I figure out how I'm going to invert this with the new updated version of Lightroom. Okay, there you go. I've selected it and inverted it now, and I will reduce my exposure a little bit so that I can darken those corners. Yes, here I'm reducing the exposure. So I'm really happy with the way that looks. And after I've done this, I'm just going to check my the previous image. I can see it's more on the blue side, so I'm going to go back. And yeah, that's the previous one. It's more on the blue side, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to go to my temperature and I'm going to decrease it a little bit more towards the blue side, so that's a bit cooler, because I like my images to have more of a blue tone, especially this one. I don't always do it, but I would like this one to have a blue kind of tone. I think it suits the image. So I hope you liked this course, and if you have any questions you can contact me through Instagram or my email. Thank you very much.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra definition and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Y olvidarme completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.
Hi, I'm Craig Strong with Lensbaby, here to talk with Uta Rakhorn. Uta is a photographer living in Los Angeles, California, who makes images full of spontaneity and life. She's here to explore the idea of moving through fear with me. Lensbaby's mission statement is, we empower artists to move through fear to discover extraordinary creative freedom. Uta, good morning.
Good morning, Craig, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. So I want to start out with a big question, which is, why does this question or this statement resonate with you of moving through fear?
Well, I think it would resonate with almost any artist because it is the major motor for most of us, I would assume, at least when I have conversations with other artists. That's a subject that comes up quickly. So the way I look at fear is, it has been my constant companion over the years. And at times it has been paralyzing, and at other times it has been like a motor, because the moment it kicks in, I would say I'm a defiant person. So when I'm aware of what is going on, I will start fighting that feeling. So if I'm not aware, it can paralyze me. And because it has these two powers in my life, I think it's a super interesting subject to talk about. It can be inspiring for others to hear that they are not alone, because I feel artists who do not have a big social network often feel like that is a unique experience, and that's just not true. It's a very, I think it's a human-wide thing. We all know about it. And like I said, it can hinder you and it can motivate you. And yeah, I feel like most of my journey has been inspired by fear, either by overcoming fear or by being paralyzed by it, and then having this discussion in my head with myself where I'm like, oh man, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I pick up my camera? Why didn't I go out? So yeah, this is why I find it is a very interesting discussion.
So I want to start with the paralyzing. Can you tell me, share an example of a time when you were paralyzed and it didn't motivate you towards something great?
Yeah, I think, to be really honest, it paralyzes me almost every day. Yeah. So I have this tradition of going outside every day to try to pick up my camera and use it every day. And even though I've been doing that for years, when I'm really honest, I have this conversation with myself the moment let's say it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I know golden hour starts and I should be going out by now. And then I'm like, maybe the sun is not out today. Maybe I won't see anything interesting today. Maybe I will be tired. You know, this inner dialogue starts immediately. And then to overcome that and to say, well, I know this is happening. I know this is part of the routine. This is what has to happen. On some days, I can do that. And it's like, okay, shut up. Let's go now. And on other days, it's like, yeah, it's really bright outside. I should probably stay at home. And so that's the paralyzing part.
Huh. Wow, that's super honest. I appreciate that vulnerability.
And then when I look over the course of a year, I feel like my work comes in waves. So there's the beginning of the year and I'm super motivated and I have all these ideas for new projects, and fear is maybe working with me, but on a different level. It's like questioning myself. Will I be able to finish the projects? Will I be able to make all this a reality? But my energy level is high, and then the fear cannot really paralyze me so much. And then towards the middle of the year, when I'm a little more tired, fear becomes more powerful, or almost like an excuse. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that. And maybe the work isn't so good. And then towards the end of the year, all of a sudden with Christmas approaching and festivities, energy comes back. And then it's not so hindering anymore. So that is something I have watched over the course of a few years, where I'm like, there is a pattern. This is not happening only this year. This has happened like many years before.
So what do you do in those months where you've recognized that, hey, this is a low energy, this is a hard time for me to push through my fear? How do you get ahead of that?
That's hard. That is really difficult. Sometimes I just fight it, and then I come home and the work isn't good and I hate myself a little more. Sometimes when I'm really wise and I feel balanced, I can say to myself, well, that is the time where you need to take a break. And I recently read a quote, growth requires rest. And that really resonated with me, because I feel like as artists, we often keep pushing ourselves and we keep pushing ourselves to discover boundaries and maybe even go beyond those boundaries to discover new work and find new inspiration. But we also need to give ourselves room to rest and to charge our batteries.
Yeah. So work requires rest. What does rest look like for you?
Not touching my camera.
Yeah.
And that is hard. That is really hard, because the beach is so close to my house. So I go there basically every day. Sometimes I take my husband with me or I take my kids with me. And when I was new to photography, I would always have my camera on me. And that was a little disturbing for all of them. But now when I'm in this time where I realize, oh, I need time to charge my batteries, I leave my camera at home on purpose. Okay. So it's a conscious choice where I'm like, okay, I know I'm exhausted. I need time to just enjoy, not go to the beach and enjoy what is there. You know, really, really be present, really be in the moment instead of trying to produce something. Because when I try to produce something, I go there because I know it will inspire me, but I'm no longer really taking the original beauty in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like it needs to be there so I can transform it into something else.
Yeah, this reminds me of one of my mentors who talks about FOMO, and instead of applying that to business or money or whatnot, apply that to all the other things in your life and think about, okay, if I'm looking at the busyness in my life and all these things that feel important, and I'm not spending time doing the things that are important to are more important, then I should have FOMO about that. Like I should be thinking, as I'm sitting here at my computer worrying about, anything, mm-hmm. whether that's that I need to adjust my photos because I haven't shared anything, or because, I've got an investment that I need to pay attention to. Think about all the things that I'm choosing not to be. And it sounds like you're applying that to something that's important to you, which of course, paying our bills is important. But it's and photography is important, but also your family and having time and being in the moment yourself without having to document it. Sounds like that's a, takes a higher value for you.
Yeah. So I have thought about my relationship to plants recently. So if you look here at my surroundings, there's a lot of camera gear, obviously, but there are also plants. And that's another passion that I rediscovered when COVID started. So I was always into gardening when I was a child. I grew up in a very rural environment. There were planting was always part of my life and childhood. But then when I had kids and we started traveling, I gave up on houseplants because I didn't have the time anymore to be a good plant mother. And then COVID started, and someone inspired me. I was like, yeah, I have plants in my house and love them so much. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And I started reviving that hobby of mine, and I really enjoy it. And I was wondering, where's the connection? And I think it is watching plants grow, how you nurture them with water and with light. But in the end, you need to give them time to grow. So there's nothing else you can do. You cannot really stretch a plant. You cannot really push it out of the soil. You need to wait. And I think that is, there are a lot of parallels when we talk about art. You can create the environment. You can allow as much freedom as possible, but you cannot really, there are no buttons. There is no formula. There is no way to force art or productivity. So as much as you need the soil and the water and the sun, you also need time and time to rest at times.
Well, that's profound. I love that. I makes me wonder that the plant of your creativity and your photography, is there a time when you've pushed through that fear and you have picked up your camera? And can you talk about what you were able to do because you cared enough to be anxious about it?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I have a good example. So basically what I see is I need the time to rest, yes, but I need to make sure that that doesn't get out of control, because then it turns into losing the inspiration. So once I had that rest time, I make photography then almost like a workout for me again. I might not even be inspired, but then I still pick up my camera and I still go to a place where I know something could happen. And I also know that I need to give myself time to produce the work that is not great. And that can be weeks. Sometimes it's a month, where I come home and I look at my pictures and I'm like, there's nothing I can use. There's nothing I need. But when I look back over the course of a year, let's say the pictures that I took in 2020, I see it there. I needed to do that work that was mediocre to discover something, to get somewhere. And then eventually this piece that turns out and is amazing, that is just a result of the whole curve, of the whole process. So that's why I think fear, it's important to understand that it exists and it will paralyze you, but also to use it as a motor, or there's a word, cathartic.
Cathartic?
So, yeah. So when you allow yourself to go to a point and there's like a lot of pressure, and then all of a sudden the explosion happens. So this is how I also feel about fear. I hate that feeling, I wish it wouldn't be there, but I think I need it. I need it as like a little whip, the constant, hey, go, try. And then eventually it happens, and all coming together, and it's fun. And yeah, I hate it and I love it. I think I have a hate-love relationship with fear. That's it, bottom line.
Well, speaking of that, you talk about your family sometimes getting tired of you always having your camera, and yet I see just some amazing images, collaborative images that you've done with your daughter over the years. It sounds like you've pushed through that with her in times. Is there a particular image or breakthrough or moment that you look back on and say, okay, that's when it kind of came together, that she was all there and it wasn't me being a pain as her mom?
There have been many. All the images that I really love, they were presents that she gave me, where she was present, where she allowed me in her world, and where I was just a spy. And again, going back to the story that I just mentioned, that you have to do your work and that you have to do work that you don't like, this could only happen because I had practiced before. And the moment she was there, she was open and she was willing to give me that gift of her presence and of allowing me to take an image that was like a glimpse into her soul. That could only happen because I was prepared, because I had trained before and practiced over and over again. And all these crappy pictures when I'm like, oh my God, this is not what I was going for, and not what I had in mind. And then, so all that came together. I feel like every good portrait as a photographer, you have to thank your subject. I mean, you're there and you make it happen, but without their willingness, this magic will not happen.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like that's twofold, where you spent, months, weeks, years, maybe just kind of slogging through saying, okay, well, these images are not necessarily what I'm after. And then when the moment was ready and when the connection was there with her, with other people, with the the planet, with the ocean, with the beach, you were ready, and those
I
moments
think
came.
connection is a big word.
Yeah.
I feel that is the one thing that I really need to create my work. So after dealing with the fear and overcoming that, the connection is like the next big thing. Is it the connection with the lens, or is it the connection with your subject, your environment? If I don't feel that connection, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And I remember that I watched that when I started using the Omni filters. So I have been shooting with the Omni filters ever since I got the first filters. And that was, I think, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I still have the pictures all in my catalog. And when I look at them, it's like, boy, what was I doing during the first year? I was just holding them, randomly into any kind of picture, and didn't really make any sense. But I needed that year to figure out how I can make them part of my art, how to use the light, and how to hold them, how to feel these filters. So now I have the connection. I really have a connection with each of them. And I know exactly what I want when I use them. But without the connection, that wouldn't happen. And it didn't, like I said, an entire year. And in the beginning, I didn't see it. It's like, oh yeah, those are good pictures. I never thought those are great pictures.
So what kept you going? What kept you going for a whole year to figure out that, yes, there is a connection here?
Curiosity. Because I had seen prism photography before. It was done with different prisms, and that had intrigued me. So I really wanted to figure out, how do you make that kind of art? So that was one thing. And then also, if something doesn't work for me, that is a reason to keep pushing. It's really a reason where I feel like, oh, that door is closed, I don't want to go there. I'm a curious person, and I really like adventures. Yeah. So I think adventure, the whole spirit of an adventure, that keeps me going. Yeah. So as soon as I really know what's going on, it's like time to move on for me.
Well, and I remember you were one of the beta testers of the optic for the Obscura. Mm-hmm. And you shoot on a crop sensor camera of Fuji, is that correct? Yeah, and so
not Fuji, it was a Canon, but it was crop sensor.
It was crop sensor.
No, it wasn't crop sensor. That's not true. It was full frame, but it was the 50 millimeter.
So it was 50 millimeters. So it was longer than you necessarily normally shoot with, and it was pinhole, a whole different kind of photography. And I just remember you coming back and talking about your frustration, but sharing these amazing images in the group of photographers. But you were so frustrated that it wasn't, it took you so long to get to the point where you got something that, in our opinion, was just mind-blowing, but you were still in that learning phase. And so that was really poignant for me, of saying, oh wow, you are, one, you're pretty hard on yourself, because you weren't happy with these images as all of us were. But two, you were still pushing yourself too, to say, okay, is this something that can work for me? And you weren't going to give up easily. That's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember that was it was a hard one. But like you said, when I have very high standards, I always say I don't have a vision when I photograph, but I think that's only partially true. Even though my pictures come from a certain state of mind, I know what a good picture makes. And if that doesn't come together in one picture, it doesn't work for me. So I rarely use Photoshop. I do adjust contrast and color in Lightroom. But my editing is very basic, so I expect a lot from my camera and from my skills and from the location. And if that doesn't come together, I'm frustrated. And I was frustrated with the Obscura in the beginning. Oh my goodness, I still remember using it the first time. What is that? But like,
that's a common...
If you offer me a real adventure that gets me going, it's like, okay, this thing isn't working for me, but it should be working. I mean, they invented it for a reason, and then I started diving into the history, and I found that really interesting because it was a part of the photography history that I wasn't familiar with. And that made me curious. It was like, oh, almost similar to what I had done with prison photography. With prison photography, it was already on my mind. You know, it was like I had those images on my mind. But with the camera obscura, the product came first. And I was like, okay, what have other people done with it? And then I looked at these antique pictures. I was like, oh, I was hooked, you know, I really liked the effect. But then for me, it's also important to make it mine. I don't want to just copy someone's work. I want to invent something in a way, which might sound funny because with billions of pictures that have been developed, it's almost like impossible. But still, I feel you can have your own, you can make it your own with your style. And even if it's not 100% new, you can still have, it's almost like an accent, you know, you can have an accent in your photography and people can recognize that. And I wanted that with the camera obscura. And it took me a long time, but I got there. And then it was fun. And then it was very rewarding.
So you talk about seeing other people's work, that they've done something inspiring. You talk about going back to the history of these ancient images. You know, I think the very first pinhole was documented in like 200 BC in China, and that you could put a hole in a wall, and on the opposing wall would be the upside down projection of what was on the other side of that wall. You know, I mean, that's like the first sign, you know, use of a lens, and it's not a lens. And so those were things that gave it credibility and made you, what I'm hearing is made you interested and willing to push through. But what is it that, I mean, you've given Lensbaby gear the learning curve that it takes and mastered probably everything you have, to the point where you know where that fits in your vision of the world. What makes you so tenacious to stick with it through that learning curve?
I think part of it is my upbringing. It's like a German thing, you know, that we get pushed really hard through our entire childhood to be better. It's the one thing that surprised me when I moved to America during my first few years, when I watched the kids at school, how they got for every result a well done. And that was like mind blowing for me. It's like, wow, that wasn't well done. That's not perfect. That was my attitude. But I also saw what it does to the kids, and they felt so good. And they felt like, that was well done. Okay, I might try even harder next time, you know? And I feel like in Germany, we believe in, if you praise too early, it will make you lazy. But I witnessed that's not the case. So I think even though I have changed over the years in America, it's still in me, that desire to prove that it can be done better and there is more to discover, and never give up. I feel like that. On the one hand, my German upbringing is coming through in that, but on the other hand, also my story of traveling and seeing all these things and being influenced by so many cultures.
Yeah, well, I commend you on your tenacity. That's because the images that you do create are very powerful, and I love hearing about the process behind them, and that, you know, it's not, you know, they're bright and beautiful and colorful and full of joy, and your daughter's jumping in the air all the time, and yet the process to get to that point of a finished product that you're willing to share is not necessarily a linear one. It's not just I'm feeling better and better and better. Sounds like you're going down into the dark night of the soul at times before you find that brightness.
No, all the time. And the reason I'm so honest here is because it meant a lot to me when I was a younger photographer, a less experienced photographer, to have these conversations with more experienced photographers and to understand that they also have their dark moments and that my fear is not unique. So I feel sharing my story is hopefully helping someone else. And when you say all these wonderful things about my photography, thank you. It means a lot to me. And I never feel like I'm there. I never feel like I'm this great photographer. No matter what I do next, it will be brilliant. This is not who I am and not how I feel. I think every day is a new adventure. It's like, okay, is the voice talking to me today? Is it there or is it not? And honestly, there are many days where it's not happening. And I just learned to be okay with it. And that was a long process, and it was at times frustrating, and it was definitely not the process I was asking for.
Yeah.
I thought it is linear. I thought you learn your technical side, and then you get better gear, and you get more known, and by then you will be happier in your photography. And I think I can say I'm very happy in my photography, but I can't say it's easy. It's never easy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Uta, for letting us in on your process and see the internal journey that you're committed to and you're willing to go through in order to do something that you're proud of, that you feel satisfaction in, and that really expresses the way you see the world. And you do see the world completely differently. There may be billions of images, but all of us see that world based on an infinite number of variables that each of us have gone through. And that's what Lensbaby wants to allow people to express, because if everybody's shooting with the same gear at the same f-stop at the same range of focal lengths, we end up without that diversity. And so I really appreciate that you've chosen Lensbaby, and I'm honored that you have.
I have not only chosen you guys, I love you guys and love the products, and I love how each product allows me to express myself. When I also write often about Lensbaby products on my blog, I have often compared the lenses with certain brushes. As a painter, you buy specialty brushes. Not every painter uses the same brush. And I have tried different lenses, and I have regular lenses and Lensbaby lenses, but I feel like Lensbaby lenses are my brush. It's the brush that allows me to paint my best picture.
Oh, that's profound. I love it.
I mean it.
All right, Uta, thanks so much for sitting down with me and having our virtual conversation and sharing this with the Lensbaby community. You're inspiring, and I'm glad you're part of it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra dimension and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.
Hi, I'm Allie Franz, and I am a Lensbaby Ambassador, a Click Pro Elite, and a Click Pro Ambassador. I am so excited to get to be here and be a part of the 2021 Shoot Extraordinary Photography Conference. During this presentation, I'm going to take you from start to finish through my shooting process, my editing process, and how I add creative flair using tools such as the Lensbaby Omni wands, my Trio 28, which is my favorite lens, my Edge 50, and others that I have in my creative toolkit. I'm really excited about showing you my process and showing how Lensbaby can add creativity and really elevate your images. I found that since I started using Lensbaby, I have been able to express myself more clearly. I have been able to really find my voice, and I've also rediscovered how to have fun with photography. There was a time where I spent the majority of my time learning the rules, which I think is an absolutely imperative part of the photography process. But what I love about Lensbaby is it really did give me the opportunity to think outside of the box, to stop aiming for what I perceived to be perfection, and to really have fun learning how to express myself artistically. When looking through my work, you may notice that I am a big fan of flair and color. I love utilizing creative ways to accent your images, to maybe highlight something in your images, and my very favorite lens for that is going to be the Trio 28. I think that I have mentioned before, but just in case I haven't, the Trio is a combination of the sweet effect, the twist effect, and the velvet effect. Now, my favorite here is absolutely the sweet effect, and I'm going to show you some images in just a minute that have the flair, which just absolutely captured my heart. So this is the Trio 28, and this is my go-to favorite Lensbaby lens. I've challenged myself to use this flair in as many different scenes as possible. Coming up, I will show you exactly how I go about adding it to my scene. Now I have my lens set on the sweet setting on the Trio 28. And as you can see, as I move around, this is my favorite thing to do with the Trio, is to get that beautiful sun flare. So I've got my daughter over there riding on her bike. And my favorite thing is to just play around with it until I get that beautiful flare to come through. Now I am at 1/500th of a second, and this is an f3.5 on the Trio 28. And I have been waiting for her to just kind of come through the scene and keeping my focus. The Trio is a center focus lens, so every time she gets about right there, I was snapping the picture. I'm at ISO 100. And this is again on the Trio 28 Suite, but again, there's that flare that is my absolute favorite. And what I'm going to do is show you the different optics. So this is in between optics. This is what you get with the velvet. So this is the velvet effect. This would be the twist. And then again, we go back to my favorite, the sweet. So now that I've got my images uploaded into Lightroom, I'm going to go ahead and show you start to finish how I would edit. This one I chose because I love that you can kind of see her hair. You've got this beautiful flare, you've got the braid, the basketball that she thought was so fun to be pushing through. So what I would go ahead and do with this one, starting out, is I am just going to bring down those highlights a teeny tiny bit. And then honestly, I might bump up the contrast and just go ahead and get this leveled out a little bit. Let's see, and I like the shadow, so I don't want to take too much out of that. And actually, I don't know, because our driveway is slanted, I don't necessarily love the way that worked, so what I'm going to do is just kind of do a full there, try out auto. I love to play around with all of these different options, see which one I prefer. I think I might go with that. So then what I like to do is I might dehaze this just a tiny bit. And then I like to take it into Photoshop. Okay, so now that I've got Photoshop open, what I like to do is run a couple of actions on here. This one has a tendency to lighten and bump up the contrast. Sometimes I play with it a little bit to see. I don't necessarily need that much contrast, maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe not lighten it up quite as much. And then I will go ahead and flatten that. And I had another preset. So this one's flattening. Sorry, it's taken just a minute here. I have another action that I kind of went in and modified, so I like to apply this one as well. And you can kind of see the difference here. Just kind of brightens it up a little bit, makes the colors pop a little bit. Sometimes I don't like these midtones to be brought up quite as much. So again, I just kind of play around with that. I do also, just to kind of show you again the difference there, then I'll go ahead and flatten. And I do like to come in and kind of play with the colors a little more specifically here. So I am going to go and create a hue saturation layer. And I'm going to mess with the greens just a tiny bit. And one of the things I was taught is to just take it as far as it can go. You can see how it's kind of changing up in the color there. I like to make my greens just a little more blue. I am going to come to the yellows and maybe not as much. Maybe pull the saturation of the yellows down just a little bit so you can see those very subtle differences that I made there. And even then, I might not pull that saturation down quite as much. Let's see here. So these are really subtle differences, but I am kind of being a little specific here. Okay, sometimes I will do an overlay. I don't always use these, but occasionally I will try them out and see how I feel. And then here I will do a Command T just to kind of get this to fit over it. So you can see how that added a bit of a vignette. It's a little, I kind of like it It's a little bit much, so I'm going to pull it out here, maybe pull it up a little bit. I do like how it kind of brought out the shadows, but I don't necessarily want it to be all that strong. So what I might do is come back through here and create a layer mask. And then I will let's see if I can move this out of the way here. Let's get a brush. And what I might do is make this like 30% and just kind of come in. Oh, let me make sure it's on black and just pull it off of where it's a little too strong for my liking. So over here on the sides, it's a little darker than I would like it. Provides a little too much of a vignette. So I'm going to brush it off. And this is really subjective. This is just my personal perspective. You know, you might like it a little bit better. Then I'm going to zoom out because my face is in the way. Let's see, kind of get it off of these corners a little bit more. I might increase the opacity. Okay, so I just increased the opacity of my brush and I am just kind of taking off that vignette a little bit more. But as you can see, it did kind of bring out those shadows, bring the focus in on her a tiny bit more. I might brush it off a little bit off of here just to make her pop a little bit more. Maybe that was a little too much. Add it back in. Okay, so I am going to fit the screen here. So what I like to do is go back to what it looked like when I brought it in, and then come here. And you can see how those colors just pop a little bit more, really brings out the flare. So I am going to flatten this, and then I am going to save it back to Lightroom. Okay, so now we have this image back in Lightroom, and what I might do is just pull up the blacks just a teeny tiny bit. I do have another preset that I like to use. Again, I will pull those blacks up. I do sometimes like to come back down here and just play with those colors just a tiny bit more. Maybe bring the yellow over to orange just a little bit more. Her skin looks pretty red. Let's see here. What do we have going? Trying to find a brighter part of her skin. What I'm looking for here is that her red, green, and blue values are all within a good range to render natural looking skin tones. I might just actually, I think I might not really mess with that. Let's see, I might pull, where's my saturation? I might pull down the greens just a teeny tiny bit. And so you can see that just pull the shadows back down a little bit. I might come to the luminance of the orange and just pull that luminance up a tiny bit. I might also bring down the yellow saturation. Maybe the orange just a tiny bit. Let's see. One other thing I might do is do make sure that this mask is inverted. Maybe also here I'm adding a radial filter and pulling up the shadows and making other minor adjustments that will apply only to her. Okay, so here's the before, there's the after. You can see that the colors just pop. I do feel like I may want to, let's make sure this is inverted, just pull down the saturation on top of her just a tiny bit. You'll notice that I go back and forth quite a bit between my original image and my edits. My goal is to make sure that I am making subtle enhancements to my images that bring out the color and the subject while not going overboard. Just going back through here, I'm looking over on the side panel. Let's see. I think I might pull the orange saturation down just a tiny bit more. So here is before I brought it in for the final touches, and there is after. Again, pretty subtle, but that is what I would do with this image. I hope that was helpful. My favorite thing, I am always a sucker for this flare that the sweet effect on the Trio 28 produces, but I also love this beautiful bokeh. I love that it really makes my subject pop. You know, I know there's a little bit of fall off on the skateboard here, but things like that don't really bother me. I really kind of want your eye drawn here. She thought it was so fun to roll that basketball on the skateboard, and that is what I wanted to capture. So I hope this was helpful, and thank you guys so much for being a part of this and for watching my process. When I mentioned my creative toolkit, I wasn't kidding. I definitely have a kit of Lensbaby lenses that I love because they give me a variety of different options depending on how I'm feeling and what I feel like shooting at that moment. So this actually just came off of my camera. This is the Composer Pro 2 with the Edge 35, which is a lens that I find myself using quite a bit. I also have the Sweet 35, I have the Edge 50 in here, and I have the Sweet 50. But what I also wanted to talk about is the Obscura. Some of you may have heard of this. This is the newest release. I had the absolute pleasure of beta testing this lens, and some of the photos that I've created I will share here in just a moment. And what I love about what this lens did is the way that it rendered color, the unique look that it gave. The color and unique glow here really add something special. Another thing that I use to add color and creativity to my images are Omni Wands. The great thing about Omni Wands is they can be used with any camera. I have used them with my iPhone before, and I've got some videos that I will show where I am using the Omni Wand with my Twist 60 and also using my Omni Wand with the Trio 28. But I wanted to take a moment now and show you some of my favorite wands so you can get an idea of exactly what I'm doing when you're viewing it from my perspective in the next couple of videos. So these are from, let's see if I can hold it over here, from the Color Expansion Pack. And I really love these ones because, as you can tell, they've got all kinds of fun colors. So I love using these to add that something extra to an image if I feel like it's lacking, or if I just am feeling vibrant and playful. I also really like this one. This is the Stretch Wand. And this one adds some fun effects as well. It doesn't add color, but these are some that I like to use quite frequently. Again, just to add another layer of interest to my images. So I'm going to show you out in the field how I would use these. There is an entire system where these will be held onto your camera. I actually handhold them personally, mainly because I feel like I am shooting on the fly. A lot of the time I've got my girls And so for me, it's easier to kind of slip it in my pocket or even have it in, they come in these cases. And so I will have this in my backpack and just kind of pull that out. So that's how I use them. But I love that there is flexibility and that there are a bunch of different ways that you can use these. I also love to sometimes just take an image with my Omni wands and then later use that as an overlay to composite with another image. I feel like that's a fun way to play, and maybe sometimes if I'm in a rut, I really like to do that to see what I can create that maybe is out of my normal wheelhouse. So I hope you guys are enjoying learning about this, and thanks so much for sticking around.
I am using the Lensbaby Twist 60. I have it set at f5.6, 1/500th of a second, ISO 100. And what I wanted to show is how I would use the Omni. So the sun is coming up over my right side. And so to add a little bit more to this image, what I might do is just play around, and I'm twisting slowly so you can see how it's reflecting the garden around us, throwing in some flare. And this is the Omni wand that I'm using right now. And I might bring it over to this side, see if I can get some different colors over here. And what I like to do is just twist it slowly. I am hand holding it and just seeing, you know, this is kind of the fun flare and effects it can produce. You could always do it from down here too. And that's one way that I would use the Omni. So right now I am using the Trio 28 at 1/200th of a second, ISO 100, and I wanted to show some fun ways to get some fun effects with the Omni color wand. I love how it's reflecting what's behind me. So you can see those deep purples, the trees behind us. It really is giving it a fun effect. I also like from this corner to get a little more that sun flare and those colors. And you want to hold the wand close to your camera. This one is a wide angle at 28. So it is definitely fun for playing around, adding a little something extra to your images, adding a little more color. I really enjoy these wands.
Another thing that Omni wands are great for is hiding something in your frame that you necessarily don't want there. As you'll see here, I switch from side to side, but it's really great for helping to eliminate something from your frame that maybe you don't want to be there, whether it's negative space or if you want to hide a building. So that's a fun trick for using these Omni wands. I wanted to show you what I meant when I talked about combining images as a composite and adding that Omni potentially as an overlay. So here are 3 different images that I took the other day when I took out this was with the Twist 60 and these were both with the Trio 28. And this one has a lot of negative space here, so I thought it would be fun. So I'm going to Command A and Command C to copy, and then I'm going to Command V to bring that image here so we can show, you know, this layer. And so I am going to try with a soft light. You can see what it looks like as a screen. I almost liked the soft light, but then with the opacity, let's see, let's try normal, and let's try on 75% opacity. And I am going to create a layer mask and come over here with a brush. And I am going to brush this off. I'm going to make sure, let's make sure my brush is at 100%. And I am going to brush this off. I think I'm going to brush it off here because it did take away, but I erased some of that bokeh. So I may bring this to 50% and see if I can add some of that bokeh back in. Oh, sorry about that. Let's make sure my brush is white. You can see it's adding back that bokeh, which I do like there. I am going to go back to my black brush and maybe just brush this off a tad. And so without the overlay, you've got that. Now we've got some fun colors, kind of this sky reflection over here, which I think is fun, framing around her. And the last thing that I wanted to do is add this one in. So again, I'm going to Command A, I'm going to Command C to copy, and then I am going to Command V to paste this one in. And I am going to Command T so that I can transform this. I'm going to hold down the Shift so that it keeps the ratio. And I am going to move this over here. And then let's see what soft light looks like here. I kind of like that. I might try screen. I like that too. I might do screen at 50%, and that's kind of the look I'm going for. I might try to make this a little bit bigger and fit it on there. Let's check that. And then I'm going to do another layer mask, make sure that it is on my black brush to remove it. I might go 100% here. And just remove those edges so that it blends in a little bit more. I might play with the opacity just a bit. And then I'm going to come back down to this layer. Oops. I am going to see if I can bring this down. That's a little strong, so I am going to put my brush at a 50% opacity, just kind of bring that texture out. So I am going to show you what it looked like before I did those overlays with the first one. Maybe tone this down a little bit, add back in the second one. And I like to just play with this. I'm going to mess around with my brush again, maybe put it down to somewhere around 20%. Try and brush a little bit of this back on. And so there is the before and the after. And then what I would do is flatten. And now that my image is flattened, I'm going to apply the actions that I typically apply. And I am going to Command G to group these together and change the opacity on those. And then I will layer flatten image, and I will come to my next action, and then I will layer flatten. And then I'm going to save this back into Lightroom for my final adjustments. So now that I've got this back in Lightroom, I know that the first thing I want to do here is bring a radial filter over her and pull up the shadows. Let's make sure it's inverted and pull up those shadows quite a bit. I'm going to make it a little bit wider because I want to brighten that whole area. I might also pull up the exposure a little bit, maybe bring up the blacks. And you can see how that brought her into focus. Then I'm going to go ahead and apply a preset. I'm going to pull up those blacks a little bit. I might increase the exposure a tiny bit more. I might also pull down the contrast just a tad and pull down the shadows. I am going to maybe even pull down the saturation. In here. So here is the before and here is the after, and I think I might honestly just bump the exposure a tiny bit more, mainly because when I export, my images look darker than they do when they're in here in my camera, no matter how many times, or I'm sorry, in my computer, no matter how many times I calibrate it. So this, I believe, will be my final image, and it's loading. And there we go. So this is what I was talking about when I said I enjoy doing the Omni as an overlay. I know this is a lot. There's a lot going on in this image. This was more for practice to show you how I do it, but at the same time, I really like colors and textures, and sometimes I just feel like being a little crazy. So that is how I would do a composite overlay. Here are a few of my favorite captures using the Omni. I wanted to show one of the ways that I nail focus with my Trio 28. So I have a custom button. You can see we're kind of over here by this beautiful stream. And what I'm wanting to do is I am going to push my custom C2 button on the Sony A7C. And what that does is it really zooms it in, and I can move my focus peaking to show what exactly I am focused on. This was a little tricky to do one-handed, but what I'm trying to show here is in the bright red, you will see what I am focused on. This is my focus peaking, and I utilize the red to show me what I'm focused on. And then, as I mentioned before, I have my custom button to do focus magnifier. So I will zoom in specifically to see exactly where my focus is falling. I do believe some SLR cameras have this. I know that a lot of mirrorless cameras are known for this. Again, this is the Sony A7C, but this has been a lifesaver for me, particularly when I switched over to Lensbaby lenses all the time and manual focus. I was nervous to invest in manual focus lenses because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do it. And I have tried time and time again to record this through my camera, but it doesn't work. And so here, I hope that these videos here give you an idea of exactly what I'm doing with my magnifier and focus peaking. The final thought I want to leave you with is something that has been recommended to me over and over again. Any class that I've taken has been to really study the light around you. I have taken numerous courses where one of the assignments is to go throughout your home during the day, maybe hour by hour, and see how the light is hitting, where the shadows are falling. And as you dive into it, you'll really start to understand exactly how important it is to know the light around you. I would encourage everybody to just take some time throughout the day to go and explore an area that you are familiar with, an area that you tend to capture the most, and just really observe that light throughout the day. That is how I stumbled across the flare, was while I was playing around with the Trio at golden hour, just happened to be using some backlight, and it was happenstance and ended up being something that I, clearly enjoy, and I certainly don't mean to overdo it, but it brings me such immense joy that I love to incorporate it into my work. I do have a video coming up that will be kind of one of the final ones, just where I noticed a beautiful sunrise and I wanted to see what I could do with it. So I grabbed my camera. It was about 7 a.m. and I have found that as I have studied and practiced more, I am constantly seeking out the light. I am looking for what calls to me. I look for shadows, and it has only come through practice. So that is one thing that I really want to emphasize is just take time to go out and shoot, have fun with it. You never know what you're going to create, and it will absolutely be extraordinary.
So here I am in our front yard. It is about 7 o'clock in the morning. This is at 1/500th of a second, ISO 100. And I am, again, this is f3.5 with the Trio 28, and I just kind of wanted to show you, I know I do this a lot, but I really love moving around with that flare, trying to get interesting light. And I'm not sure if you can see the focus peaking or the magnifier here. Let's see that. I can zoom in to see really where I'm focused on and just play around with it that way.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me as I discuss my creative process. I hope you've enjoyed this, and feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks again.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra information and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Poetic, oniric look.
Something extraordinary.
I'm Jennifer Carr. I'm a landscape, nature, and travel photographer and photography educator. Today I'm going to talk to you about how I use Lensbaby to create unique landscape photographs. When I was learning photography, I was taught that landscape photographs needed to be very traditional, very straight, very in focus throughout the scene. You should use a tripod, you should use focus stacking, you should use a really narrow aperture, all of these rules and restraints and constrictions that begin to make me feel like I was trapped inside of a box. I discovered Lensbaby at a time where I really felt that I wasn't able to express myself creatively, and I wanted something to really allow me to spread my creative wings and make my work more unique than what I was seeing from traditional landscape photographs. I discovered the Lensbaby Edge 80 about 6 years ago, and as soon as I put it on my camera and took it out to the beach, I absolutely fell in love with it. The Lensbaby Edge offers a slice of focus that goes from edge to edge of the frame. The focus moves all around based on where you point the lens and how you tilt the ball mount effect of the Composer Pro, which I'm going to walk you through in a few moments. But the slice of focus really allows you to direct your viewer's attention to what you feel is the most important part of the photograph. It allows you to isolate subjects, to direct the gaze, to remove things that you might not want to include in your frame by use of creative blur. For me, using the Lensbaby Edge is a sense of freedom, a relief, a breath of fresh air. It is kind of phototherapy for me. A lot of people think of macro photography as therapeutic. For me, the Lensbaby Edge is therapeutic. I can take a photo walk, I can, walk on the beach, walk through a mountain trail, and anything that I isolate with the slice of focus and the edge really stands out, and it makes me feel relieved that I can direct my viewers' attention exactly where I want them to go through this creative tool. So I'm going to talk to you about each of the optics for the Edge series. I have the 35mm, the 50mm, and the 80mm. Each of them offers a different focal length. 35mm is obviously going to be your wider lens, and the 80mm is going to be more of a telephoto effect. The 80mm adds more compression, whereas the 35mm allows you to get more of the scene, more of the story, something like that. So I look forward to sharing this with you, and let's get started. Okay, so I want to walk you through the Composer Pro mounted with the Edge optics. Here I have all three Edge optics, the 35, the 50, and the 80 focal lengths. The 35 is the largest and the heaviest of the optics. It has a metal construction and it goes further into the Composer Pro. The 80 is the smallest of the optics, but all of them fit into the Composer Pro the exact same distance, so they all end up being about the same size on your camera itself. The Edge series, again, uses a slice of focus that goes from edge to edge of your frame and allows you to really direct your viewer's eye. It has a variety of apertures. The Edge 80 goes from 2.8 to f22. The Edge 35 starts at 3.5 to f22, and the 50 goes from 3.2 to f22. So the 80 is going to be your fastest, but all of them are going to get you a good amount of light into the camera and allow you to really creatively use that slice of focus. The more narrow your aperture, the larger your slice of focus. The wider your aperture, the more narrow your slice of focus. So it works much in the same way as a traditional lens and depth of field work. The Composer Pro itself is a piece that mounts to your camera. It has the actual lens mount here, and so you're going to want to get the one that matches your camera system. And then it has this tension mount at the front, which is going to allow you to change your optics and mount those there in the front. It has two sections, and the back section with the ring that is closest to the camera itself when it's mounted allows you to twist the ball head and allows that tilt shift effect. You can rotate it all around in the kind of ball and socket area there. If you tighten it, it does not twist. So that's what really locks it in. If you directly center the edge optics, then you're going to have more of a traditional lens effect with less of a slice of focus. But you're going to want to rotate this all around to really maximize that slice of focus. The ring here on the front is your focusing ring. So it's going to bring the optic in and out as it's working to grab focus. The Edge series, as with all Lensbaby lenses, are fully manually focused. So you're going to need to focus them yourself on your camera. So to mount the optic, you're going to look for the dot on the optic itself and the dot on your Composer Pro. You're going to line those up and you're going to twist, and then that locks that in there. Once it is mounted, you can then mount it onto your camera here at the base. I'm going to talk through a couple things about it before we do that though. So the optic itself is where you control the aperture. It has an aperture dial that goes from 2.8 to f22. The focus is gained on the Composer Pro itself, and the tilt is all done here. So all three of these have to work together as you're working to create photographs with the Edge series. First thing you're going to want to do is to determine your aperture. Typically, I like to recommend starting at about 5.6 as you're learning how to use the Edge series, because that gives you more of a plane of focus to work with so that you can see the effect more clearly. As you get more comfortable, going to a wider aperture, shooting at 2.8 or 3.5, depending upon which lens you have, is going to allow you to get more of the blur, more of the creative, dreamy effect that the Edge can offer. As you change your aperture, when it is wide open, you're going to have a thinner slice of focus. As you narrow down your aperture, you're going to have a larger slice of focus, more in focus. You're going to want to manually focus using focus peaking if you have it. Focus peaking is a great feature that is offered by many camera manufacturers that allows a color to show up in your viewfinder, your LCD, to actually see where focus is going to fall. I also have a button on my camera. It's this button here for me on my A7R3. I have that set so that I can actually zoom in on a preview before I take my photograph so that I can see if my focus is exactly where I want to be. That's really helpful with the Lensbaby tools, or if you're shooting close up, something like that. So as you move the Edge optic around in the ball area, if you go up and down, you're going to have a horizontal slice of focus. Right and left is going to give you a vertical slice of focus. Diagonal, which is what I find myself tending to kind of play with, is going to give you a diagonal slice of focus. If you're looking to create a miniature effect, you're going to want to shoot down on your subject and use a wider aperture to allow for a smaller slice of focus. This is really fun if you're, at a high building, maybe in a hotel room, something like that, looking down at a city street, and you can create that miniature effect. It's a really cool thing to play with. So you're gonna then be able to mount the Composer Pro on your camera. There is a little dot there. You're gonna mount it directly onto your camera body. And so now we have the ability to start taking some photographs. So I'm going to loosen that a little bit and then tilt this all around and Once I get it where I want, I turn and kind of lock in. The other feature that the Edge 80 and the Edge 50 offer is a close-up effect. And so here on the Edge 80, if you pull out the very front ring, then it's going to actually allow you to get closer to a subject. It's not true macro, but it's going to give you more of a macro effect. The Edge 35 does not have that, so that isn't something that you can do with that, but you can actually mount close-up filters on the Edge 35, which you can't do on the Edge 80. So it's kind of a give and take. You can choose what you want to play with. The Edge 50 also offers the close-up effect, pull in and out to use that. So those are the Edge optics and how they work with the Composer Pro and once you mount them on your camera. Using Lensbaby lenses allows me to move beyond the traditional landscape photograph. I love to point the lens directly into the sun, creating unique and radiant flare. This is particularly helpful when the sky is lacking color and clouds. Lensbaby Blur creates subject isolation, allowing your subject to truly stand out while blurring the rest of the scene. Using a Lensbaby also allows you to direct your viewer's eye throughout your scene, which creates depth and storytelling. Lensbaby lenses expand your creativity by challenging you to let go of perfection and embrace chance. One of the things that I love most about using Lensbabies is that I'm able to capture a variety of images regardless of the conditions, whether there's tons of people around, lots of noise, lots of activity surrounding me, no color in the sky, no clouds in the sky, whatever might be going on in the environment that I'm shooting in. I'm able to really just hone in, use the blur, use subject isolation, and capture imagery that is going to be very different than what I would be capturing if I were using a traditional lens. In this video, you can see I am on a pretty crowded beach in California. There's a lot of activity around me. The sky itself is a really unique yellow color. It's not exactly brilliant, but the color effects that come with Lensbaby lenses really amplified the yellow and really made that stand out, as you'll see in the resulting photographs. So here I'm just kind of walking around and observing what's going on all around me. There's tons of surfers in the water, as you can see from the guy that just ran in with his board. Lots of people playing on the shoreline. The rocks were definitely the most interesting feature outside of the surfers. So I really tried to explore and find some ways to capture those rocks and make those look unique through the camera lens. You can see I'm twisting and turning, moving my focus and my slice around, really working to see things differently through the lens and use that blur and isolation. I am varying my aperture. I'm generally around f4 to f8, just depending upon what I'm photographing. And I'll turn that and change those settings as I'm looking through the viewfinder. Next, I'm going to change to a different optic. I started with the 35mm optic, and now I'm going to be using the Edge 80. I'm going to be working to get a little bit closer to the rocks and to the shoreline, and also to the groups of surfers that are out in the distance. They're pretty far from the camera lens, but I am able to use that 80mm focal length to bring them a little bit closer. So I right now am photographing the waves coming onto the water or onto the shoreline. I like to time it and let the white water settle and look a certain way as it comes across. I'll also use the LCD on the back of my camera so that I can look down on it. I have a tilting LCD, so sometimes I'll use that to look through it, and then I'll work to tilt and shift the Lensbaby Edge in the Composer Pro mount as well. When there's not a lot of visual interest on a scene in a setting, I will look for smaller details, look for things that will really make it stand out. I noticed that there was a fishing boat coming across, and so I stopped at one point and started photographing that. I tried to isolate and get in on specific rocks that I thought were pretty. The light was hitting the rocks in a very reflective manner, which I knew was going to pair really well with the bokeh that the Lensbaby Edge produced. So I was just shooting from a variety of different viewpoints and just different ways to really make this scene, where there wasn't a lot of visual interest but there was a lot of activity, look unique. I do like to use the focus magnification button on the back of my camera when I'm working to really nail focus. So you'll see sometimes that I'll move my thumb to the back of the camera so that I can zoom in on that and really magnify that. That helps in addition to the focus peaking, particularly because I had my focus peaking set on the yellow color and I was shooting into the sun, which offered a yellow color entering my viewfinder. I was having a hard time seeing the focus peaking under these conditions. So I was definitely using the focus magnification. These are all settings that you may have in your camera as well. I encourage you to either go to Google or pull up your camera manual and see if you have focus peaking and focus magnification options. They're very helpful when using manual focus lenses. And once I feel that I have truly caught all the things that I've been looking for, I will move on and go to the next scene or change my lens. I will continue to look around and see other ways that I can capture something. In this moment, I noticed there was a group of surfers that were standing up by a lifeguard tower, and they were holding their surfboards in a particular way that I really liked. Now I have pulled out the macro feature on the Edge 80, and I am getting closer to those rocks, trying to capture those details. So generally I will end with something like this if I see something that's very small and I feel like will really add to the story of the series of images that I've created. I wish I had seen the guy coming out of the water with his surfboard behind me, because that would have been a great shot as well. And one more view of that boat that was going across the scene, really cutting through the sunset. And now I will share with you some of the photos that I captured. I hope you have enjoyed seeing how I use Lensbabies to create extraordinary landscape photographs that are beyond the traditional. Chance. One of the things that I love most about using Lensbaby.
Dreamy artistic images.
Emotive and soulful imagery.
That extra dignation and quirkiness.
Really unique images.
Se olvidaron completamente.
Extraordinary results. Creamy bokeh and a dreamy feel.
Creative and quirky landscapes.
Unique blur effect.
Fun flares.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here for day 2 of the Shoot Extraordinary Conference. I don't know about you guys, but today was absolutely phenomenal, and all of our speakers and presenters were absolutely incredible, and you guys were amazing as well with all of your participation and showing up, and it's just been such a meaningful and exciting day, and just think we are only halfway through. So keep in mind that tomorrow we will be back at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and if you missed today, in the entirety, if you're just catching it or you need to watch it later, the replays will be available. Again, we'll put that up on all of our social medias. It'll be on our YouTube over the course of the next coming days. But in the meantime, before we head off for the evening, wanted to give one more gift card away for participation for all of you amazing Lensbaby addicts today out here. And I have a $250 gift card for, hold on, I need to find their name. Where did it go? The suspense. Jillian Chan. So Jillian, congratulations. You get a $250 gift card for lensbaby.com. What you will need to do is email customerhappiness@lensbaby.com. Let them know that you have won and we will get you taken care of. Yeah, I see someone saying we're watching. It's 1:30 a.m. time for bed. Yes, you should go to bed. The replay will be available for you tomorrow. So to everyone who's participated, everyone who is here watching all around the world, all different time zones, thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for supporting Lensbaby and everything that we do. And tomorrow we will be back for day number 3 of the Shoot Extraordinary Conference. So be sure to stop by, check us out, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be here all day. Till then, have an amazing day and be extraordinary.